And we'll begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, and why not 1? All right. Welcome, everyone. This is Michael Cowden, Director of Student Engagement for ICSC. We have been doing these series of nice conversations during COVID when we're all online these last couple of weeks, and we are honored to have Luke Petherbridge with us today. So we want to get it started right away. But housekeeping items, we want to take your questions in the chat and keep everyone or hear Luke's comments on the industry and beyond. So with that said, Luke, let's go to you. How are you holding up?
Good, yeah. I've got to say, I'm sitting up in my attic in my house. I have 3 kids. They're all running around downstairs. So it is a challenge, I think, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's a bit of a wild time at the moment.
Well, let's start with the easy question, right? So I'm sure everyone can detect an accent. So let's hit the highlight reel of your career and how you went from Australia to Chicago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to say it's probably the path less traveled. And I think in the middle of January and February, I sort of question being in the northern part of America. But I think I lived in Cleveland for 5 years in the middle. So when I was about 30, moved from Sydney, Australia to Cleveland, Ohio for a job. I'm a huge Browns fan, so I'm going to watch all the people hang up, because if I'm a Browns fan, that probably means I believe in things too much. But I lived in Cleveland for 5 years, worked for a firm there, DDR, which is an open-air shopping centre REIT, huge REIT there based in Cleveland. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to start ShopCore with Blackstone. And that really gave me the opportunity to live anywhere in the US. And when I really sort of think about, if you're on a national platform and you're trying to attract talent, one of my big things is really first the who, then the what, find the right people, and then the outcomes actually produced. When you think of those areas, it's those big cities, Chicago, Dallas, LA, New York. If you think of somewhere in the middle of the country, in the Midwest, I sort of grew to love. So it was really a job opportunity that led me from Australia to the US. Although I will say, for those that have been, whether skiing or living in London, there's a lot of Australians that infiltrate the world generally. I think Australians have a natural desire to live offshore. One of my big things, and I think a lesson I've learned throughout my career, is be open to change, like really embrace it and try it. I mean, there's very few people would move from Sydney, Australia, Cleveland, Ohio. I think that was probably the best individual work decision I've ever made in my life.
I like how you use the term infiltrate.
We're trying. It takes a while.
Yeah. So, when I first reached out to you to do one of these, you started with kind of a big picture philosophy of where you saw things going. And obviously you have a seat with retail real estate, but also residential as well. So I wondered if you could kind of walk me through your big picture thought process of, how you see COVID affecting the industry right now.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of ShopCore and of LiveCore. I mean, we're not very original with names, ShopCore and then LiveCore, so living and shopping. So ShopCore, we have about 20 million square feet of open-air shopping centres, so grocery-anchored, Walmart-anchored, Target-anchored sort of shopping centres, which in every community. LiveCore, it's apartments. We own about 80,000 apartments around the United States. We're one of the largest owners, and we work with third-party operators. I would say that there's a lot more in common and ex-COVID, just in general in real estate. Like if you think everyone, whether it's every lecture you go to or every great real estate owner, it's all about location, which is totally true. If you own great real estate, you're going to go through economic cycles over the life of that real estate. Great pieces of real estate will not only hold their value, but over multiple years and decades, because we own a long-term asset class, will continue to create value for its owners, for its residents, for its communities. I think community is where the commonality between the two asset classes really are. If you really think, and I'm going to broadly run you around the world, if you go anywhere in the world and think of any suburb or community, at the center of every community, you've really got the place of worship, the church normally has the pride and center of town. So think of anywhere in the United States, but Australia's the same. Then you have the school, the place of learning, and then you have a place of, to buy goods and services, which would be the local shopping center. So you think of your local grocery store. And then you have housing, and whether it's single family or multifamily, which is what we own, this community aspect of our real estate is really what is very comparable in the two asset classes. If you think of COVID, I don't think there's any asset class, or very few, particularly in the real estate sector, that's going to be totally immune to what's going to happen. I think what these sort of cyclical downturns, and particularly a crisis like this, if you look in history, what it does is it probably accelerates some of the trends that were already existing. So an easy one for retail is, if you think of e-commerce, it's been growing. It's probably going to accelerate post-COVID. I think everybody that's on this call right now would have been buying online with social distancing. I think some of those habits are going to stay. I do think what will follow on from that is the ability to logistically ship you goods is going to need the store. So I think you're seeing firms like Target saying that their drive online or their digital sales jumped 275%, of which 80% was actually delivered from the local store. The local store and the footprint, which is closest to the consumer, so proximity to consumer, is going to matter a lot more post-COVID than it did pre-COVID. That was a trend that was already existing. You were seeing big retailers, Home Depot, Walmart, Target, the local grocery store, Instacart helping, actually using their footprint already nationally to do that. So that's something which I think will continue to do that. Something we've seen since the 1970s, and most of the people on this call are too young to probably think of this, but the malls, people used to walk around the malls all the time. That was something that happened. There's been a sort of a gradual shift away from the mall, and that's been going more towards open air. However, malls have been reinventing themselves to be experiential. I don't think it's a surprise or a secret that department stores have been ceding sales share for the last 40 years, not the last 10 since Amazon came, the last 40 years as other retailers have emerged and have better merchandising plans or better fulfillment capabilities closer. So I think you'll continue to see that. Some of the things you might see sort of reversing a little bit in any sort of economic downturn, you see consumers generally trade down, like tightening the belt is probably a better way to think of it. I think grocery stores, Walmart, Target, off-price retail, off-price fitness, I think they will continue to win a lion's share of the consumer wallet. And I think as consumers sort of emerge from the isolation and stay at home, I think they will be ones that continue to win. I also think if you think of just financial, what has happened in the last 5 to 7 years, balance sheets, we believe as a landlord, really matter. Like how big your balance sheet is, what your wherewithal is. But for the last 3 or 4 years, there's been lots of companies that don't make money. I think we all know them. I won't mention them, but think of all those direct-to-consumer startup brands that really don't make any money. They're cool, they're disruptive. I think they're going to really struggle. I think they're going to find it a really tough time. And the firms that have, like whether it's Publix or H-E-B if you're in Texas, or Wegmans, or Ulta if you think of the beauty, or Sephora, firms that have huge wherewithal to be able to withstand disruption, I think matters. And if you think of retail, retail has been evolving for the last 100 years, ever since retail existed. If you think back in the early 1900s, it was all street retail, corner store, local, and then it sort of ebbed away from that to grocery stores, department stores, malls were sort of in the 50s, then Walmart and Target brought everyday goods to the masses, then it was power centers, then we really got to e-commerce, and then there was almost this shift back to this local consumer stuff, more recently with street retail. But retail is constantly evolving. This is just going to be another round of evolution. It's probably going to be faster. There is absolutely going to be fallout. If you look at anyone's IPO prospectus and look at their top 20 tenants, Simon's a great one, massive firm, incredible organization. Look at the number of retailers that are still there that they had when they went public. It's very different. So I think retail continues to evolve, but I think the real trends are the piece of real estate closest to the consumer is going to matter more in a post-COVID world than it does today. With regards to residential, It's a little different. I think there is definitely going to be a headwind. I think it's less to do with the COVID impact itself, like the stopping and starting of consumer confidence, but more of job losses. We saw today that the total number of jobless claims since the beginning of COVID is now 30 million. So it's basically eradicated all the job growth since the last downturn. And apartments really thrive on job growth. The positive for apartments is that we've been undersupplying apartments for the last decade. So it has a better supply-demand dynamic. I think some of the things which are going to change, though, is adoption of technology. I think for anyone that, as you go into sectors, one of the things real estate historically has been bad at is adoption of new technology. We've actually been probably a late follower, and I think we saw that with, in retail, you saw Amazon come in and everyone's trying to catch up. I think in apartments, a lot of things like virtual tours, we've all sort of scrambled in the last 3 weeks because you can't actually be in social distance with one another, so everyone's virtually touring apartments themselves. One of the big side benefits of that is, for those that have done apartment shopping, the worst thing to do when you're apartment shopping is having a salesman right beside you trying to sell you that apartment for you to lease it. You actually get better conversion if we show you the apartment and we leave you alone, and you can then visualize your furniture, where you'd set things up, whether you have kids, whether you don't, the amenities. Like, you can actually, it's like walking around a hotel almost and say, this is where I want to live. So there are some things that are going to stick through this, and I think we're going to adopt the change, particularly at LiveCore across our portfolio. But I don't think any asset class is immune. It just depends on the supply-demand dynamics. But again, at the very beginning of this, great real estate. If you own a great piece of real estate, whether it's office, a hotel, which is really in trouble at the moment, apartments, retail centre, a mall, this is going to be a tough 12, 18, 24 months as we work through this, but great real estate continues to be great real estate.
So yesterday we had a wonderful conversation with Whitney Livingston. She's with Centennial. And one of the things that she was really driving home with the evolution discussion is the relationship between the tenant and the landlord. So I wondered if you had any thoughts on what that might look like post-COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think, and we don't need to get into any tenant-specific stuff, I think this is a challenge. I think everyone is challenged. Their business models are coming under extreme stress. It doesn't matter what you do. If you go to the most extreme, it's probably airlines. But just if you think about it. But as we think through our retailers, we understand how challenging this is. If you're a grocer, it's a great time. Not that you wish, but you're doing really, really well. You're a necessity-based retailer. People have to eat at home, and you're close to the consumer. It's almost like a huge tailwind. There are others that have closed their businesses, and what we tried to do at ShopCore, as has every landlord that I've spoken to, is be empathetic to what is actually happening in the environment. And we've tried to be accommodating and being a good partner to all our retailers, big and small, and understand what it is we can do to keep them in business post this, how we can help them reopen, whether it's procuring masks and gloves, which we have a better opportunity to do than some small retailers, whether it's financial help short-term, which they can pay back. I think as we go through this, it's really going to sort of come down to things we've been doing for the last 20 years, building relationships, being partners, continue to be good partners. And look, it's no shocker, not everyone's going to be a great partner. We acknowledge that. We have to do what we think is right for the asset, for our local communities. But I think as we think through our assets and our communities, the vibrancy that like a small shop, our mum and pop retailers bring to our centres is something we want in a year's time. So we should be willing to help. And I think some of the bigger retailers should be aware of that and help pay their freight at the moment. And I think that's where we are at the moment. But I think most, nearly all retailers are treating this as a time, and landlords, that we come together. And honestly, it's a time that the whole country is coming together, and the globe almost, and working together to sort of solve through what is a extremely challenging financial and, medical issue at the moment.
So let's hear the real deal. What everyone's here to learn about is, where do you see opportunity for young professionals and students post-COVID, and where that growth is going to be?
Yeah. So if I start at a very broad piece, the size of the real estate sector in the United States is bigger than like the NASDAQ and the S&P combined. Like it's so big. So I would say that the opportunities, and even if you think 10 years ago, things like data centers didn't exist. Even student housing was basically not an institutional asset. So I would start by, I believe real estate holistically is such an incredible career opportunity for both, aspiring, business professionals, as well as people that are in the industry. Like a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have said I would have been the CEO of a multifamily company. I'm trying to be a CEO of a multifamily company. Maybe I won't say I am one. I'm trying to. But I think the opportunities are endless. I think particularly in retail, it's a necessary part of our supply chain. In no world is everything going to get delivered to your door. Whether it's service, which is what all of us have been doing more leases with service-based retailers, experiential-based retailers, which will come back. It'll be time, but it will come back. Whether it's value and convenience, I think that part of the retail spectrum and retail in general is an area that's going to constantly evolve. I would say probably something I've been more focused on in my career has been, you want to challenge yourself. I couldn't think of an industry, or particularly in real estate, that's more challenging than retail. It's been evolving, as I said, for over 100 years. I think the next evolution is going to be much more focused on how does it become the integral part of supply chain and be close to the consumer. I really believe the proximity to the consumer is going to matter more in the next 30 years than it has in the last 50. We've been driving more places, drive out to outlets. I think it's now going to be much closer to the consumer. So I think, if I really look at it right now, if you look at just the equity markets have traded the peer set of open air, like community retail, basically have devalued their real estate by 20%. Like that's a huge haircut, which is probably overdone. I think the opportunity is when there's a dislocation between sentiment and actual results, which is an area that I think we're all trying to participate in. I think that's a great opportunity. Also, what actually happens out of a downturn is new retailers emerge. And I think, like always, we're going to have the entrepreneurial spirit globally, and particularly in America, where new retailers will emerge, and we will continue to evolve our shopping centers and our place in our local community. I think that local community aspect of what we offer, not just it's a store. I think we are integral in the local community. I think will be something that stands the test of time. And I think it's an area we're very, very focused on. And I think, cautiously optimistic that it'll sort of be resilient after some sort of mediocre performance.
So I just want to remind everyone, we want to quit hearing from me and hear from you. So if you do have questions for Luke, I see a couple came through, please put them in the chat. We'll get there in a minute. But Luke, I want to ask you, obviously you've been very successful. So what are some things that you did earlier in your career that really helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I would probably put it into three broad buckets. I would say, obviously everyone's going to work hard and be smart. And I think, honestly, that's a given now. Like everybody has probably got degrees, they work hard and are smart, and every young person has that. So I would say that the things I've sort of held were be open to saying yes and change, like be adaptable. If I really think about my career, I started working in funds management, it had nothing to do with real estate, like equity funds management. I worked in customer service for that. I then had an opportunity. This was probably the juncture spot in my career. And it's a funny story, so I'll tell it just quickly. I had a chance to go work for a hedge fund, which was a small firm, 2 or 3 people, or go work for Coca-Cola. I really wanted to work for Coca-Cola because I got free Coke at lunchtime. Just so people are clear, back in the early 2000s, that was not a thing. Like now, like kitchens are stocked with all this cool stuff. Back in the early 2000s, it wasn't. But I was so enamored by this, you can get free drinks at lunch, that I'm like, oh, I should go, and Coke, and it's cool and all that. Thank God my father was smart and said, you should go to the hedge fund. And I got to work with, which will be my second point, work with a Rhodes Scholar, someone exceptionally bright, one of the smartest people I've probably met and got to work with. But that business was $20 billion when I joined in 2004. And when I left in 2008, was $5 billion. And we had listed 3 companies, a US real estate company in an IPO in Australia, a Japanese IPO, and a European IPO. An opportunity that it came to me, but it was probably the path less travel, working for this little tiny firm and believing in and working for someone that you felt you could learn from. The second thing I would say, so be open to change. The second thing I would say is constantly learn, like be an avid learner. It's slightly different to being an avid reader, but constantly push yourself, challenge yourself, push yourself outside the comfort zone. Be a learner. I mean, I moved from Sydney, Australia, Sydney is an awesome place to live, to move to Cleveland, Ohio, awesome place to live. It really is. But it's a significant difference in huge difference in weather, like massive difference in weather. But, be open to learning and push yourself, try to do new things. I mean, I can use even the last 12 months. The easy answer for me was I'm running ShopCore. Why would I want to take on a huge apartment business that I don't really know everything about? This is a challenge. Try it. I mean, I think what I would say to myself as a young 20-year-old is you want to finish saying, I worked out where my limit was. Like at ShopCore, I say to people we hire is the positive of our firm is you're going to work out what your real limit is. The negative is you're going to find out how good you really are. And I think in the main, most people are much better than they intuitively put a boundary in themselves. And the last thing I would say, and which is more apparent now than ever, never give up. There's going to be times in your career, and we've now gone through effectively every decade at the moment, where you're going to go through an economic malaise, a downturn. If you did this 6 months ago, I wouldn't have put pandemic in my answer, or a pandemic. You are going to go through significant challenges in your career, whether starting your career, the middle of your career, the end of your career, you will have these. I've sort of taken the view of don't give up. In the last recession, before the recession, I joined Macquarie Bank and became a CEO of a small REIT, Macquarie DDR Trust. And 2 weeks after I joined to be the CEO of that company, it's only a little firm, all US retail listed in Australia, Lehman goes bankrupt. And we went through basically a 3-year workout of a firm that I thought I was stepping in to grow. Could have been easy to say, this wasn't me, I didn't set it up, but it was a real opportunity to learn, one, how to work through such a significant downturn, which you're all going to get to do over the coming, multiple years, and you will get again. But the learning opportunity, and then also I got to meet the board members of that company, find mentors as you go, as you're learning. Bob Joss, who was the Dean of Stanford, who's now on the board of Citi, was on the board of MDT. Steve Gutman, who was the CEO and one of the architects of Federal Realty, which is one of our bellwether companies, was on the board. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, but you've got to keep pushing through. So I think it's be open to change, always be a learner, challenge and learn, and then never give up. They were the 3 things that have led me to this path. And, if you'd asked me at the beginning, am I going to live in Chicago and I'm going to be a Browns fan? I don't think I would have said that. I live in Chicago and I'm a massive Browns fan.
Yeah, I think there's a movie to be made about your life just from Sydney to Cleveland alone. I think that's in the works. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to cut to my colleague, Angela Rizzo. She's been monitoring the chat, so she's going to read some of the questions that we've received so far. So Luke, you're going to hear from the real chat.
All righty.
Yeah, so our first question is, what drives your interest in the real estate industry?
Ooh, I fell into real estate. So I didn't get to go to a flashy school like Wisconsin and their real estate program, or Penn or anything. I went to the hedge fund, to Rubicon, which is a little hedge fund, and we just got presented, it was an M&A, a long short, an Asia dividend fund. And we just got the opportunity to buy a portfolio of US GSA assets, which are government leased assets around the country, industrial, office, an FBI building, which was kind of cool. And we took it public, and it was more of financial thinking as opposed to a real estate thinking. The thing I would say though is that as it sort of evolved, I became way more interested in the asset than the financing of it. And 2 great examples, when we did a European IPO in Australia, we bought some buildings in Berlin, and one of them was, I think, at the Hochtief or the PwC headquarters, and it was built, it's right in the middle of Berlin, where all the old, it's brand new, but it's built right where the Berlin Wall was. So there's this strip of land right in the middle of a city that basically became available because they knocked the wall down, and just had this great story. And the other one that really got me interested is when we did we listed a Japanese portfolio. Two things. We bought an asset in Sapporo, which was way north, that had a Ferris wheel on the roof, something you're never going to see in the US, and that was kind of cool. And then another one we bought an asset that had this little building out the front, and when you buy, you have to get surveys, and this building wasn't on the survey. And I'm like, we need the survey. And they're like, oh no, don't worry, you'll be fine. And I'm like, but it's a building. They're like, oh, don't worry. And they literally just put some wheels on the side of it and said, now it's a movable object. Don't worry, you don't need to survey it. And it's just the nuances of real estate is so interesting. And then my love of retail probably came later. Like, I really thought the real estate industry was exciting, massive. So $48 trillion in the US, 16 trillion is commercial. The rest of the 32 is homes. But 16 trillion, it's an enormous business. But then the US, retail is really nuanced, and I think the thing that makes it so unique is it's not a commodity. If you think of most asset classes, apartments, I don't really care who else lives in my building. Like, my neighbor is not the reason why I live there. It's the amenities and other things. In a retail point of view, if I'm next to a Whole Foods, I really want to be next to the Whole Foods, or I really want to be next to the Altar. So that non-commodity nature and the co-tenancy requirement is something that's so unique to retail. In office, you don't know who else is in the building. It doesn't really matter. But retail has this ecosystem and this community that really drew me to it. And there's, it's something that's really interesting. So I sort of fell into it, but I'm glad I did. And it was more of an opportunity that I said yes to.
Great, thanks. Our next question is, how would you estimate COVID-19 will influence density and technology in retail design in the long run?
I think the long run, I'm not sure it changes wildly. I think people are creatures of habit. I think short term, for sure, there's going to be social distancing, capacity limits on restaurants, gyms are going to have capacity limits, movie theaters, there's going to be some of that. Let's assume we all have to take the basis of, we get this under control, we have a vaccine in a year. I do think in 5 years, people will want to be around people. I think it's something that's been around for thousands of years. We enjoy each other's company. If anything, millennials are trending even more that direction. This obviously pauses that. Short term, I think there is going to be more technology. I think there's more e-commerce, which I mentioned earlier. That's going to be more of people are going to obviously order things more online. That keeps you away. I think capacity limits, but I think with regards to technology at assets, I think you're going to see, and we've got it at a few of our ShopCore assets, cameras that use AI that you can sort of check social distancing and make sure we're not overloading capacity limits. I think you're going to see it more in other asset classes as well, malls, office. You're going to have contactless entries to get in and out of in and out of stores. So I think short term, there's going to be great disruption. I think longer term, though, I think it's probably going to ebb closer back to where we were.
Great. And we have one more question for now. A question we kind of get quite often, but do you have any interview tips for students? How can they stand out in an interview, or what things do you look for in a candidate?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say you want to show your passion for the sector, your ability to learn, like you really want to learn. That doesn't mean you need to know every answer at all. You can absolutely come in and say, I'm unsure about that. That's something I need to learn. I think, but showing that you have this desire to better yourself and challenge yourself and grow. I think showing that you have growth opportunities or growth potential opportunities is what we offer. I think you showing us you have great growth potential is something, as we look to hire, young candidates, that's probably something we focus a lot on. So I think just be yourself. I think don't overthink it. Be who you are. Show us that you really want to learn, and show us that you have great growth potential. That's probably the areas that we would be most focused on. If you've got a degree, you're really smart. We assume we can teach you what you don't know. So you don't need to come rolling in and saying, I can use Argus or I can, model an M&A. We're not looking for that generally for the roles that you probably are going to be applying for. But showing that we can teach you that and you're going to be a good cultural fit to the firm is probably an area. I think as I've thought about something as we've built firms, the people matter more than the assets. And you can own great real estate, but the people can really screw that up. Great people matter more than great real estate. So I say great real estate matters, but great people do. And I think all managers and senior managers and CEOs think more and more about culture today than ever before. And I think showing that you can fit inside that culture and that ecosystem that is the firm, I think is really, really important.
So question for you, Angela, do we have any more from the chat right now? I think we're good, right?
Right now we're good, yep.
Okay, yeah, so question for you, Luke. How, obviously besides Coca-Cola, and you turned that one down, but what are some of your favorite projects?
And I've been paying for Coke ever since.
Yeah.
Really disappointing.
Yeah, so, that was a role, but what are some, standout projects that you've worked on that you were really proud of, and how did you get a seat at that table to work on that project?
Yeah. I would say that the Coke thing, the thing I would, if I was looking at every job I've taken or every project I've worked on, whether it's for a firm I'm at or even externally, it's really to work with incredible people, like work for or with incredible people that inspire you and challenge you. So it goes back to what I think is important as an individual. You're looking for the reciprocal. So I think my greatest, one of my great work accomplishments were, again, listing these 3 IPOs. So a US one, I mentioned the Japanese one with the little wheels on the building that make it not a building, which I still don't think was totally right, but whatever. And the European one. I think, if I think of like an actual project, I think at DDR, we did some developments and retooled some assets. There was one particularly out in California that I wasn't really a developer. I'm really not a developer, but working with people and learning from them. And they were in seniority, they were junior to me, but in that sort of role, I was very junior in that and learning and sort of helping that get across the finish line with financing and other things. Some other things which aren't specifically professionally related, ShopCore and LiveCore have created a philanthropy called Giving that raises money and feeds children that can't feed themselves, 1 in 6 kids. I think that would be, if I think of a legacy that I've left with ShopCore, I'd like to think it's a great firm and great people. I think it's called Giving, which is something that, again, just fell like it was an opportunity. We grew it and it grew dramatically, which is really great. And then it's obviously LiveCore and ShopCore, the businesses themselves. I think for anyone that works there can just see the talent. And I think it's really focusing on first the who, then the what, find the right people. And the right people, honestly, I'm the least important person in our organizations by not a little bit, by a lot. I think the people that we've got and have attracted are just incredible. And I think every great business leader would say the same thing. It's the individuals that you've been able to do. So I think a great accomplishment of mine, if I think of it, it's not really a project, so I don't want to make it feel like that, is being able to assemble incredible talent that works together. I think is probably the best thing.
Very well said. I love your thought that the people matter more than the real estate, because that's really how you build on the project, is with the people you work on it. So very well said, Luke. We're going to close it out here unless we get any last minute questions here, but I just wonder, obviously you have just tremendous insight, but is there anything you want to leave us with? I know a lot of folks are feeling anxiety, during the crisis and graduating soon, or maybe graduating next year, or maybe they're, working in the industry now and are still concerned. So any big picture thoughts to make this feel right?
Yeah, I would say, and it's what we've been sort of saying to all our employees. One, just be careful. I think the first premise in the current environment, look after yourself. That isn't just don't go outside, but, try to find things that can relieve stress, whether it's working out or other things, yoga, meditation. Just look after yourself. It's a really trying time. Remain calm is probably the thing I'm most focused on. This will pass. It absolutely will. you've got to, for everyone on here, assuming you're in college, you have such a long road of your career to go. This will not define who you are. It won't define most people's careers, honestly. Dr. Fauci will define his career for sure, but it won't define people in the real estate business. There's a huge learning opportunity. Use that. Remain calm and use that. And then the third thing we've probably focused on is communicate. I think social distancing could also mean social connecting. Like, use this opportunity to network. It's networking differently. It's not in person, it's Zoom or on phone calls. But use this as an opportunity to learn from people that have either gone through this, working through this, these forums that, you know, Michael, thanks for putting this on, but this is such a great opportunity for people to learn about what to do, how to deal with what is a very, very trying time. I totally acknowledge that. I don't want to diminish that, but I think if you remain calm, absorb as much as you can during this time. I remember, and again, everyone's going to have lots of lessons, so find people that can teach you. But I still remember in the absolute depth of the 2009, global financial crisis, I was sitting in the office very, very late. Bob Joss, who was on the board, Dean of Stanford, called me, and he had experience of saving an Australian bank, and was just a all-round incredible human being. And he called me and he made the comment too, which has stuck with me. It's in times of, character is forged in times of crisis. So I would say to people, if you're working, this is going to forge character in you. If you're not working, this is absolutely still going to forge character in you. So embrace that change. I think you've got to adjust to it for sure. This isn't just, look, we'll get through it and we'll be fine. I think there's huge learning opportunities, but there is a great opportunity to forge character in each of us individually. Me, you, Michael, Tom as well, like who's the CEO of ICSC. I think the opportunity here is, don't lose sight of that, because I'm hoping we don't have to do this again. I don't want another pandemic to sort of forge character if I can possibly avoid it. But you will go through challenges in your life. Just remain calm and try to learn as much as you can.
Well, I know I feel better after this conversation, for sure. So we want to thank Luke for giving his time. He's a very busy gentleman. Couple of housekeeping items. We did record this. Our chat, we actually went on Instagram yesterday with Whitney Livingston. So if you go to our ICSC Instagram page, you can watch that conversation as well. We will be keeping the steam up. So we're going to put together a summer series as well. That's all going to be online, so safe from your home, to keep students and young professionals engaged in this time of crisis. So it's with leaders like Luke that we're able to do this. So we really appreciate him for giving his time, and for all of you for showing up.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. And everybody stay safe out there, and keep looking for more opportunity to knock in your email inbox. Take care, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.